Hello class. Today we'll be starting with a new topic on Western sociologist and basically we'll be studying about three important sociologists in this particular chapter starting from Karl Marx, Max Weber and Emil Durkheim. Now before we move into the details of the theories that have been presented by them, we need to focus on the background of these theorists as well. Now as we all know that sociology is something that emerged uh, in the Western Europe, and later on it spread it to rest of the parts of the world. And there were basically three important revolutions that led to the emergence of sociology. That is the period of Enlightenment, which we often call it a scientific revolution, the period of French Revolution, and Industrial Revolution. So these three revolutions had played a very important role in the emergence of sociology. Now moving on to Karl Marx. Karl Marx, he was basically a political economist, scientist who had lived in that particular period when capitalism was in full bloom, and he in his entire working he in his entire working had in his entire period of his life had written a lot of works, had basically focused on the concept of exploitation, the nature of exploitation that was going on during the capitalist period, and he had tried to highlight the plight of the working class who were exploited by the capitalists, the rich people who made the poor people work under them. Now, Karl Marx had basically envisioned a society, a stage he thought would come when there will be no classes in the society. He envisioned a classless society where there will be no classes and the entire society will be based on lines of socialism. Marx had basically stated that the society has progressed from one stage to the other. He said that society was initially a primitive society, and then it moved from primitive to a society where slavery was in full swing, and then from slavery it moved to feudalism. When feudalism got abolished during French Revolution, that gave way to capitalism, and he dreamt that this particular era of capitalism would soon end and definitely would give way to socialism, right? Now, regarding Marx's theory, basically he laid emphasis on the concept of alienation and his another theory, which is the theory of class struggle, a very important work and of Karl Marx. Before we get into the theory of class struggle, we'll be starting with the concept of alienation, his theory on alienation. Now, this particular concept of alienation is basically associated with the production process, and in this particular theory, Marx had basically tried to focus on the point how a worker who is associated with the production process is alienated day by day gradually, and he explained the term alienation as estrangement, separation from everything, right? So the English term alienation is derived from the origin Latin noun alienato, which in turn is derived from the Latin verb alienare, meaning to take away or remove. So Marx has basically focused on the meaning of alienation, and he had specified four important stages of alienation, right? He stated that the meaning of alienation as a state of separation was primarily popularized in early theological writings, and it was interpreted as a state of separation from God. Most theologians found the cause of spiritual alienation in worldly involvement. In order to avoid spiritual alienation, they encourage alienation from the physical and social world. Okay, so Marx in his particular theory had basically outlined four important stages of alienation. And for example, he stated the stages that how step by step a worker was basically alienated from the entire production process, and he went on to say that during capitalist mode of production, both capitalist and proletariat feel alienated But alienation of proletariat is of high degree in extreme form. Okay, now before we get into the details, I just need to explain you that he basically used the words capitalist and proletariat. By capitalist, of course, he meant people who were the owners of the means of production, the land, the factory, the raw materials, etc. And by proletariat, he meant the working class, right? So he had basically outlined the nature of alienation of the proletariat, the working class, through four stages. Number one, alienation from product. Number two, alienation from the process of production. Number three, alienation from human being. And number four, alienation from species being. So regarding the first form of alienation that took place, that is alienation from product, he had said that under capitalist mode of production, the worker lacks control over the disposal of his product, since what he produces is appropriated by others, so that he does not benefit from it. It is the core principle of the market economy that goods are produced for exchange. In capitalist production, the exchange and distributions of goods are controlled by the operations of the free market. So what is happening in the capitalist mode of production? The worker who is producing something with his own hands, he is not allowed to acknowledge that he has made this product, nor is he allowed to use it. So the moment he completes or he finishes off with a particular product, that is handed over to the capitalist who is selling that product in the market at highest profit. And the working class, the people, are not even given a share. Right? Thus, the more the worker produces, the less he has to consume. The more he creates, the more worthless he becomes. So you can imagine the kind of exploitation that basically took place under capitalist mode of production. Regarding the second point, that is alienation from process, the worker is alienated in the work task itself. The work task does not offer intrinsic satisfaction which make it possible for the worker to develop freely his mental and physical energies. Since labor is imposed on worker by force of external circumstances alone, work becomes a means to an end rather than an end in itself. Hence, the extreme division of the labor coerces workers to do a part of the whole work. The repetitive nature of work does not satisfy worker. You get satisfaction where you tend to use your own creativity. So imagine a situation where this worker, he is working under this particular mode of production and is not allowed to use his own creativity. He is basically turned as a puppet in the hands of the capitalist who is running him according to his own whims and fancies. And when this thing gets repeated, it is very difficult for somebody to find satisfaction or be happy with what he or she is doing. So that's exactly what was happening with the worker in this particular mode of production. Now, the third form of alienation that Marx spoke about, that worker went through, was alienation from human being. That is, in the capitalist mode of production, workers become commodity of exchange. Instead of creating object, it becomes object itself, right? And since all economic relations are also social relations, it follows that the alienation of labor has direct social ramification. Thus, from the standpoint of its possessor, it exchanges every quality and object for every other, even though are contradictory. That is, the worker who is working in this particular mode of production, he basically starts doubting that whether he is actually a human being or not, right? And because he's completely robbed of his own creativity, his own individuality, and at the end of the day, like he starts doubting whether he is a human being or not. Okay, the fourth form of alienation that Marx spoke about was alienation from species being. That is, according to Marx, eating, sleeping, and procreating essentially the nature of animal. Human being is separated from animal in this regard. And during capitalist mode of production, due to high working hours and mechanical work progress, they are reduced to consume, sleep, and procreate only. Hence, alienated labor reduces human productive activity to the level of adaptation to rather than active mastery of nature. This detaches the human individual from his species being, from what makes the life of human species distinct from that of animals. That is, we as human beings, we are capable of making things, of creating things, of bringing in innovation. But under capitalist mode of production, what is happening is that the worker is basically reduced into a lifeless object, not even a human being, basically a commodity, robbed of his entire individuality, his creativity, and he's left with nothing, right? So, what is the solution to this problem of alienation? Marx said that how to solve it, the only way through which it can be done was through class struggle. That is, he wanted a revolution to take place wherein the working class and the capitalist class, between the working class and the capitalist class, and in this particular revolution, the working class will be throwing the capitalist out of the society and will work towards creating a classless society based on socialism, where there will be no discrimination in the people, and all of them will be owning resources jointly, right? So we move on to the next theory of Karl Marx, that is the theory of class struggle. And in this particular theory, he had basically given a solution to the problem of capitalism, and he said that the social relations of production definitely define modes of production at any given stage of history, and social relations create their own dialectical unsustainability, leading to next stage of history. Example, a law of historical progression. In this particular theory, he, along with Hegel, in their famous book called Communist Manifesto, had said that the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggle. That is, as society has progressed from one stage to the other, it had progressed because there, in each and every stage, there had been a class struggle, and class struggle between whom? Between the oppressor and the oppressed. So, like in a society where slaverism was established, there was always a class conflict between the two classes, that is the slave owners and the slaves, right? The conflict between these two resulted into revolution that gave way to another new society that was based on feudalism. Similarly, in feudalism also, the entire society was divided into different classes, and the relationship between the upper two states in feudalism and the lower state was definitely not a very smooth one. It was very conflicting, as a result of which it also led to revolution and uh, gave way to capitalism. And Marx believed that in capitalism, again, there are of course two classes, the capitalist and the proletariat, and a day will come when these two classes will get into revolution, will get into conflict, and that will result in eradicating capitalism and bringing about socialism. So what is required? How is it very easy to bring in revolution? Of course not. He said that in order to bring in revolution, the workers should be conscious of their class, and then only they can think about bringing in revolution. So it was very important for Marx that the working class should should try to change their dominant ideology that was prevailing in capitalism, and then only it will be possible for them to bring about changes. So that is all about Karl Marx. Next, we move on to Emil Durkheim. He was a French sociologist, and his way of teaching, his contribution towards sociology was absolutely different from that of Karl Marx, and he had basically dealt with concepts like suicide, social facts, authority, bureaucracy, and in his entire theoretical approach, he had basically focused on the fact that nothing is individual, everything is social, and whatever there is in society is reality that has the capability of controlling, regulating the behavior of people. So basically in this chapter we'll be focusing on the social facts, the concept of social facts, and his famous theory on division of labor in society. So moving on to the concept of social facts, Durkheim had always wanted sociology to be the study of social facts, and for Durkheim, society is made up of social facts that exceed out intuitive understanding and must be investigated through observations and measurement. These ideas are so central to sociology that Durkheim is often seen as the father of sociology. He went on to say that what is social facts? Social facts are the subject matter of sociology. They are sui generis. They are unique of its own kind and must be studied distinct from biological and psychological phenomena. He said that social facts are not only external to individuals, but they are endowed with coercive power by which they impose upon the individuals independent of his will. So, what are the character of social facts? Characteristics of social facts. Number one, external to individuals, coercive of the individual, and general throughout, and independent. Right. So he had given the examples of social facts like law, family, religion. Each of these institutions is not merely collection of people. It is more than that. It has its own reality, its own existence, and it is also capable of regulating, constraining the behavior of individuals. Now, moving on to his second contribution towards sociology's division of labor in society, and in this particular theory, Durkheim basically speaks about two kinds of solidarity that governed two kinds of societies, the mechanical solidarity and organic solidarity. And mechanical solidarity is something which is related to simple society. Organic solidarity is something which is related to modern society. And mechanical solidarity is solidarity which comes from likeness and is at its maximum when the collective conscience completely envelopes our whole conscience and coincides in all points with it. What is mechanical solidarity? It basically existed in societies that were primitive and simple in nature, where division of labor was not there. The people were indulged into more or less similar kind of activities. They were indulged into similar kind of beliefs, faith, attitude, and in such societies, the few distinct institutions express similar values and norms and tend to reinforce one another. So, according to Durkheim, the traditional cultures experience a high level of social and moral integration. There was little individuation, and most behaviors were governed by social norms which were usually embodied in religion. And in this particular society, the collective conscience was very, very strong. As a result, any deviation from the normal functioning was considered as a crime, and in order to restrict crime being committed by people, the kind of law that was established was repressive in nature. Very harsh measures were taken against people who committed a crime because it was a society that was based on strong solidarity, on strong collective conscience, and it never allowed an individual to deviate from its normal workings. Moving on to organic solidarity, this is the feature of the modern society, and in this society, things are very complex. Individuals play more specialized roles as there is a strict division of labor, and they are very dissimilar in their social experiences, material interest, values, and beliefs. Okay, so this was Durkheim's views on regarding sociology, and we move to the last theorist, that is Max Weber. Max Weber, he is one of the founders of sociology, the scientific study of society, and he had a very different idea how sociology should be done. And it was defined by Max Weber. Sociology was defined by Max Weber as the understanding of the togetherness of people. And he had basically tried to define sociology as interpretative understanding of society, and he had harped on the words called social action. He said that a sociologist should be capable, should be in a position to understand the meanings that the actors attach with their actions, right? And henceforth, he basically focused on the empathetic approach or the Verstehen approach of human beings, that the sociologist should be capable of being into the position of the person whom he is studying, right? And he went on to say that this empathic understanding is not a very easy thing to achieve because sociology deals with human behavior with meanings which are very subjective in nature. But if a sociologist becomes biased, then it's going to be very difficult for him to depict the meanings or to understand or analyze the meanings that the actors attach to their own actions. Right? And hence he asked the sociologist to practice iron will, self-discipline, how to control your emotions and be objective and present the reality in front of the whole world. Moving on to his Weber's methodological contribution, he spoke about ideal type, a methodology that can be taken up by the sociologist, and he defined ideal type as being formed by the one-sided accentuation of one or more points of view and by the synthesis of great many diffuse, discrete, more or less present and occasionally absent concrete individual phenomena. He said that ideal type is not actual representation of reality, but it can serve as a guiding tool for researchers, whoever is wanting to decipher a particular social phenomena. So basically, ideal model is constructed by the natural scientist as an instrument and means for knowing nature. So the social scientist creates ideal type as a tool for systematizing and comprehending individual facts against which the investigator can measure reality. A very important contribution of Max Weber. And on the basis of ideal type, he had created his own ideal type of bureaucracy. Now, what he actually meant by ideal type was that an ideal type is something which should be near to perfect. It should include features, all important features of a particular phenomena, so that whoever will be researching later on can fall back on this particular guiding tool. But it never claims that it is the actual reproduction of reality, because most of the features that are put in ideal type are exaggerated and they often have the tendency to downplay the unique features. It is more based on general features. Right, so he basically focused on bureaucracy, one of his ideal type, and he had highlighted some of the important features of bureaucracy, like hierarchy, division of labor, qualification, advancement, seniority, etc. Regarding the feature of hierarchy, he had said that such a system offers the governed the possibility of appealing the decision of a lower office to its higher authority. So in a bureaucratic organization, which is a formal one, people are placed one above the other, and anybody who has any grievances have the opportunity to address it. Right, speaking about division of labor, in a bureaucratic organization, each and every person has its fixed set of duties and responsibilities, and it is completely separated from each other. So high authority is not authorized to take over the business of the lower. Speaking about qualification, whoever becomes a bureaucratic official, of course, somebody who is skilled and properly trained. It's not anybody who can become a bureaucratic official. Only if that person can comply to a criteria that is being given, then only he can become a bureaucratic official. So how to manage, how to carry out duties, knowledge of the rules should be in that particular person. Speaking about separation of professional and private, the bureau is separate from the private domicile of the official. It's a clear demarcation from the public and the private life. So the kind of body language that one displays in office in a formal organization like bureaucracy cannot be the same as in the secondary organization. So this is all, and finally we move on to another important aspect of Max Weber's, his theory on authority. It is another ideal type that he had created. He had basically divided the authority into three kinds: effective, traditional, and rational. And he had said that society is moving towards greater rationalization, and its greatest manifestation is in bureaucracy, which expects its members to act in formalistic, impersonal manner, that is, without passion and hatred. Thus, bureaucrats act like a machine losing human nature, hence alienated. So this is all about Western sociologists, and we will be coming up we'll be revising it again in the next class, and you're most welcome to come up with queries so that we can discuss it and move on to the next chapter. Thank you so much.